Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and today we're taking a look at the South Korean K5 and its legacy. Specifically, we have all four versions of the US imported civilian version of the K5 pistol. So this is a Daewoo DP51, this is a Lionheart LC9, this is a Lionheart Regulus Beta, and this is a Lionheart Vulcan-9. All four of these were manufactured in different places, or at least under different company names. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting to take a look at what's happened to this pattern. It's a neat pistol to begin with. It's sort of a hipster pistol to begin with. And it's developed into kind of a pretty swanky gun over here. Today's video is generously sponsored by Guns.com. Whether you're looking for something old school like the original Daewoos or something that's all modern, tactical, and tricked out like the Lionheart Vulcan-9s, Guns.com has thousands of cool pieces just waiting for you to take a look. And if you are an FFL dealer and you're looking for a way to get a wider audience to that stuff that's maybe languishing in your display cases because there's no one in your area who wants it, definitely check out Guns.com. They have a fantastic FFL program. They work with dealers across the country to bring your stuff to their entire audience and make the whole process super smooth for both the dealers and the purchasers. So definitely check them out. They have a cool section on daily deals. There's always new, cool, and interesting stuff going up for you to check out. Quick bit of disclosure here, the DP51 is my own. I bought it many, many years ago. The other three pistols are all on loan from Lionheart. They asked me if I would be interested in doing a video on the Vulcan-9, and I said, only if I can show all four elements of this thing's lineage, because to me, that's the most interesting way to look at it. So that's what we're doing today. Our story begins in South Korea in the 1980s. The South Korean military is using the Colt M1911A1 as its standard service pistol. They're getting pretty old. There's also a real question of, do we want to stick with 45 ACP? Most of the rest of the world was already using 9mm. South Korean soldiers are not as large typically as American soldiers. 9mm makes a little more sense for them. It's a smaller pistol and a more controllable pistol. And heck, at this point, we're in the middle of US pistol trials to replace the 45s with a 9mm gun anyway. So seeing where all of this is leading, an element of the gigantic Daewoo industrial conglomerate called Daewoo Precision Industries, which by the way exists specifically, or existed, specifically to make small arms and bizarrely pianos, but that's a side issue. They spend a couple years in the mid-1980s developing what will be adopted in 1990 as the K5. And it takes, there's nothing like brand new, completely innovative about it. It is an assemblage of elements from other existing designs, which, to be fair to Daewoo, is how virtually all firearms design is done these days. And there's nothing wrong with taking well-proven elements from a variety of guns and repackaging them together. We get some really good firearms from that style of design. At any rate, what we have here, there are some elements from the SIG 220, elements from the Beretta 92, definite elements from the Smith & Wesson 3rd Gen semi-autos. These are all pistols that were involved in the US military pistol trials. A lot of people don't think about the Smith & Wesson automatics in a military context because they never really got any substantial military contracts, but they sure did try hard to get them. And this is one of the legacies of that. So the most interesting element of this to me is the fire control system, which is called a variety of different things. Personally, I like to call it triple action. It's also been called fast action. It's a concept. It didn't originate on the K5. FN did this on at least one of their earlier pistols that predates this. It's the idea that you have single action, you have double action, just like a normal DASA pistol, but then you can cock the gun to single action and then physically push the hammer forward so it looks like double action. That's the third setting, and what it gives you is a hybrid. It's the length of a double action pull, but it's the weight of a single action pull. And the idea is you get the safety element of having to pull the trigger a long distance, but you're not going to mess up your first or second shot as much, or you're not as likely to, because the first and second shot have roughly the same pull weights. Double action guns, unless you're well practiced with them, there's a tendency to either jerk the first shot way low because it's a lot heavier trigger pull than you were expecting, or jerk the second shot way high because it's a lot softer than you're expecting. Anyway, I think the term that Lionheart prefers for this is double action plus, which is also pretty descriptive, but you'll see all these three different terms used interchangeably to describe the same thing going on here. And it's the same system. These are all four, in fact, mechanically essentially the exact same pistol. With varying levels of features, fit, and finish. So let's start with the Daewoo DP51. These started being imported almost as soon as they were adopted and in production for the Korean military. Okay, our very first iteration here is the original Daewoo. You may wonder why the magazine doesn't quite fit, and the answer is because when I got this, it did not have a magazine. I don't have a correct actual Daewoo magazine, but Smith & Wesson Model 59 magazines will fit and function in the original DP51s or K5s. They just stick out a little bit. So I've got a Smith & Wesson magazine in it. We've got our Daewoo markings up here on the slide. Cool kind of throwback there. This is the DP51, which is the standard pattern equivalent to the Korean K5. There was also a compact version, that's the DP51C, which is barely shorter. It's like quarter inch, third of an inch shorter. They did also offer this in 40 Smith & Wesson. That is the DH40, if I remember correctly. And we've also got this cool DPI logo in the grips for Daewoo Precision Industries. From the very beginning, the K5 and the DP51 had an ambidextrous manual safety, which is pretty cool. They're on the back of the frame. Up is safe, down is fire. So not actually difficult to disengage. It's like surprising for a 1980s military service pistol, to me anyway. Now, the fire control mechanism. This is the most interesting and most unusual element of the gun. So, it is in fact empty. We have double action. Works just like you'd expect. We have single action. Cock the hammer, fire it just like you'd expect. And then the third mode is to cock the hammer and then push it forward. And you can see it resets the trigger forward. And now I have a very light trigger pull that essentially, like the mainspring remains cocked. When you cock the hammer, it's cocking the mainspring in here. That stays cocked when you push the hammer forward. It just forces the trigger the trigger bar to go through its full range of motion again. And then, got a little bit of blind take up there. And then we've got our single action trigger pull. So essentially, if you're willing to carry it like that, or if you're kind of paranoid, you can carry it with the hammer down and the safety on, and it's super totally safe. And then when you go to fire the first round, take the safety off, and you essentially have a single action only trigger. To disassemble this, we're going to move the slide back so this notch lines up with the slide stop pin, right like that, and then push out the slide stop pin. There we go. Pull that out. This is very much a Browning system, so pretty easy to disassemble. On the original DP51s, we have a non-captive recoil spring. The barrel uses a pair of locking lugs that are turned into the barrel itself, and then locking recesses in the top of the slide. So this predates the system where people realized they could use the hood of the chamber here as a single locking surface. It's still got locking rings in it. And then the barrel bushing is pressed into place in the slide right there, not removable. And then you have a flared muzzle to the barrel to center it in the barrel bushing. Got our typical firing pin safety right there. Like I said, most of the rest of the elements of this pistol are pretty typical, pretty standard stuff. You can see a Beretta 92 style trigger bar on the outside of the frame there. And that's about it. There were a couple of different companies that imported DP51s and the other variants of them. This particular one came in through B West in Tucson. And importation of these pistols lasted until 1997. In 1997, the Daewoo conglomerate got into some financial trouble and they spun off Daewoo Precision Industries into a new standalone company. It was called S&T Motive, and fairly quickly that new company also worked out a deal to import basically K5 pistols, but now they've been tarted up a bit. So starting in late 2011 or early 2012 thereabouts, a new company called Lionheart Industries out of Washington begins to import K5 pistols, there it is, manufactured by S&T Motive in Korea. And the designation now is the LH9. This, by the way, is the compact model, the LH9C. It's the same size as the older DP51C, so you can see how little, like, there's just this tiny bit of difference in length at the muzzle, and an equally small difference in frame length. This isn't quite exactly the same pistol as the DP51. It's mechanically exactly the same as the K5, but they've started to make a few little tweaks to it to make it more interesting on the civilian market. So for example, they changed the slide serrations. They made them much coarser, which are frankly easier to get a grip on. And they added a couple of front slide serrations as well. The hammer on the DP51 was just a sort of military spur. On the LH9, they've rounded that off, give it some texturing there. And then there's a cool added element where they actually put green paint on the back of the hammer down in there. So the idea is, if the gun is in double action mode and will require a heavy trigger pull, you don't see anything in there. But if it's in double action plus or triple action, where you're going to get a very light trigger pull, you can see a bit of green down inside the back of the hammer assembly. That's kind of cool. On top of that, they give different grips that have some more aggressive texturing, and of course now the grips have a Lionheart logo in there instead of the Daewoo Precision Industries logo. So these will be imported from about 2012 until about 2015. And what happens in 2015 is the Regulus model. This remains mechanically the same pistol. You can see we have this same triple action system, still have the green paint down in there. We still have the manual safety, ambidextrous on both sides, the distinctive Beretta style trigger bar there. But this has a few more changes made, again, to appeal to the commercial market. So we have a sort of a standard, I believe it's a Novak dovetail for sights. They've got good big fiber optic sights on the pistols now. Some slightly more ergonomic grips to them. They've changed the name to Regulus. There was an Alpha and a Beta. This is the Beta, which is the compact model. The Alpha was the full length. So Regulus Alpha is equivalent to DP51. Regulus Beta is DP51C. And now the big change here is that these are being manufactured in Washington. So production in Korea ceases for the US market at least, and they start making them in Washington. This will last until about 2019, and in 2020, the company changes hands. There's a new owner, and they move from the manufacturing shop in Washington down to Georgia. These are still Lionheart pistols. The whole company changed hands, so the brand name went with it, but they now have a new owner, and the guns are being manufactured in Winder, I apologize, I'm not sure which it is, Georgia. And this, they now have a couple different models available. This is the fanciest, most tactical out one that's got all of the modernized elements. So it's got an extended threaded barrel, it's cut for optics, but fundamentally, we still have that triple action fire control system, which I still really like. They've still got the green marker paint down in there, which is kind of cool. We got your manual ambidextrous safety. One of the neat things that they did with the Vulcan, this is, I should say now, the Vulcan-9, is they actually make thumb rest grips. And so on one side, you will have this extended, I think the cool kids are calling that a gas pedal, to give your thumb a place to rest and to help control the pistol from rising in rapid fire. Now, when they sent this pistol to me on loan, they knew I was left-handed, so they put the left-handed grips on it, but they make them for both right and left-handers. So here are the right-handed grip panels. The slide cut is really quite deep, and the standard sights co-witness through a red dot. I've got this little holosun on there right now. It's convenient, it's handy, it's a smallish pistol. You can see they're now making slightly extended magazines that have an 18-round capacity. Like, there's a lot going for this pistol. Now, it is also quite expensive. At this point, I checked right before filming, the base models of the Vulcan-9 start at $1,600, and something like this is more like $1,900. So it's definitely sort of in a separate class. Well, it's very much in a separate class from the old essentially not quite surplus, but civilian side production DP51s. But it's also a pistol that now has a lot more features. So let's go ahead and take this one apart, and I will just show you the internals. I do have to take the muzzle protector off in order to take the barrel out, but our disassembly method is going to be just the same as before. We have our little slot. They've marked it now on the slide right there. Line that up with the slide stop pin. Push the slide stop through. Slide comes off. And there's our frame. Of course, accessory rail on it now. The spring is now captive, which is nice. On the barrel, you can see we have the same mechanics here. We've got the two barrel locking lugs and the two locking recesses there in the slide. We still have the pressed in bushing and the flared barrel end. It's now flared here and then continues for threading, so you can put on a suppressor or a compensator if you wanted that. And there you go. There is the original DP51 side by side with the Lionheart Vulcan-9. Personally, I think the Daewoo pistols are really underappreciated. They're a neat oddball. I like the triple action system, and they're cool to have, and they were never all that expensive. So neat piece of late Cold War military history there, and then it's neat to see this system remain in production in the US for the civilian market, although it remains, I think, even less well known than the original Daewoo's. But if you like that system and you want it tricked out for modern shooting with optics, threaded barrel, all that sort of stuff, well, Lionheart has the answer for you there. So anyway, thanks to Lionheart for loaning me these three pistols. Now that we're done with the video, they will sadly have to go back to Lionheart. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.